Welcome to Monday Next. We are two siblings with two very different businesses, but we only have honest conversations.
I'm Scott Monday, founder of Kitchen and Bath Crate, where we've turned construction chaos into systematic excellence with guaranteed timelines and results that break every industry rule.
And I'm Meredith Monday Schwartz, CEO of Here Comes the Guide, a wedding venue platform built on relationships instead of commissions, run by an all-women team that proves heart-forward business practices actually work.
We're siblings who spent 15 years challenging each other's business philosophies, and we finally decided to hit record. Every week, we prove there's no right way to build a great business, just audacious choices that actually work.
No guests, no fluff, just the conversations we'd be having anyway. But now you get to listen in. Whether you're team heart forward or team systems first, we're here to show you that business doesn't have to be boring, generic, or divorced from real life.
This is Monday Next.
All right, Scott, we have arrived at the season finale for Monday Next. We said we would do 10 episodes. This is episode number 10, but we're going to do something a little bit different here, right? We've spent 9 episodes debating our philosophies, pushing each other, thinking deeply through our positions on each one of these things. But today, we're going to get into something a little more personal. The mistakes that we've made in our businesses, the ones that cost us real money, the ones that affected relationships, cost us sleep. And then we're also going to talk about the mantras that have maybe helped us make it through those periods of time. How do you feel about this?
I'm looking forward to it. There was no lack of mistakes for me to pull from. I think that's just the way it goes when you're trying to do hard things over long periods of time. But yeah, this is the season finale. And Meredith, I got to ask, do you have any season finales from shows you've watched that stick in your brain?
My favorite season finale of all time is one that absolutely no one listening is going to have heard of. My favorite show of all time is a little CBS crime procedural called Elementary. It has 7 seasons, and the 7th season finale is as close to television perfection as I think you can have.
Really? Is that the Sherlock Holmes one?
Yeah, with Johnny Lee Miller and Lucy Liu.
Okay. I never watched it. I'm not a big TV guy, but I think Melissa watched it for sure.
I love it.
There's a couple I remember. Breaking Bad was definitely a good one. Did you ever watch Breaking Bad?
I watched a couple episodes here and there. I struggle with shows about people not doing the right thing, even when they're not doing the right thing for understandable reasons.
That's so interesting because I gravitate towards shows almost exclusively that have a leading figure that you like, but you are upset at yourself for liking. Like Don Draper in Mad Men. You're like, why am I rooting for this scumbag? Oh, it's because he lost his identity in the Korean War. And at the end of the day, you're like, no, he's just a scumbag. But I just can't help myself. Walter White, Don Draper, Saul Goodman. But I will say Vince Gilligan did Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, and then we just started his new one on Apple. Have you seen this? Pluribus. Have you watched it?
Yeah, Johnny and I are watching it right now. And the same kind of thing, the same lead character who is so difficult to root for.
Yeah, and she's great. Kim Seahorn, fantastic actor. So anyway, starting off the season finale with a season finale-like rabbit trail there. But
but actually, let me say one thing, just as far as our sibling element. You won't remember this because I actually think you might not have been born yet. One of the biggest memories I have of a season finale is Mom and Dad watching the season finale of MASH. And I don't know if you know anything about that. I think I was probably only 7. Mom was maybe even pregnant with you. But it was like a very big deal.
Well, are we going to cry on this one? The listeners may be crying. I can see people pulling over on the side of the freeway. Monday Next, episode 10 brought me to tears. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, before we get into all of that, let's talk about our Monday moment of the week. What have you got this week, Scott?
Yeah, so my Monday moment of the week, I was very excited last week to commence a coaching engagement with an individual that is newer in their business, and really excited to start that relationship. I've had my own business coach for 14 years now, and it has been Meredith, probably in the top 3 impactful business decisions I made along the way. If we were to do an episode about not the mistakes we made, but the good decisions we made, that would be in my top 3. And to be in that relationship with someone where the role is reversed. Now I'm more in the coach seat. It's just super fun. The time flies by. I just love the conversation we had the first time and then today the second time. So definitely my Monday moment, that opportunity to do something that's the confluence of something I enjoy and something that I think brings value. So very satisfying and the quintessential Monday moment for me.
Absolutely. There is something so satisfying about being able to talk through these issues and really provide aha moments to people who are newer to their role. It's really satisfying.
What about you, Meredith? What was your Monday moment of the week?
Well, not unlike some of the things that you've been doing, Scott. I've been doing quite a bit of what I call venue one-on-one coaching with my venue clients, right? Wedding venues are our clients at Here Comes the Guide. And one of the services that we offer is the ability to jump on an hour-long call with me. And I try to limit it to maybe 3 a week, but I find that I can pretty reliably fit those in. And it's so useful to me to do those venue one-on-ones. I mean, it's hopefully really useful for the venue, right? Because hopefully they really get some of their questions answered, but much more so, it is useful to me because it keeps my boots on the ground of my business. It keeps me in conversation with the actual people that we are serving. I think one of the things that can happen as you grow is the CEO boots get further and further from the ground by necessity, really. But since I created the role of CEO for myself, I really wanted to figure out a way to be able to bring value. And I knew that I could only bring value to the company if I stayed very in line with what our customer set needs. So these venue one-on-ones give me an opportunity to give back to our clients, but also I gain so much from it. But here was the thing that stood out for me this week. Usually the venue will come to me and they've got some challenge and they want to talk it through. In this case, the woman started out telling me that she had X challenge and she wanted to work it through. But I quickly realized that this was a woman who is very savvy about her business, very savvy about the industry and what's going on right now and all of that. And I just kind of kept her talking. So instead of jumping into problem solver mode, I just let her lead and went with her. And by the end of 50 minutes, she ended up saying, "This has been super useful to me. I feel like I know exactly what I need to do." And I said to her, "You realize that I didn't do anything. The only thing I did was sit here and give you the ability to verbally work that through." And for so many of us who are verbal processors, that is really what we need. It's a reason for a really good coach. It's a reason for a really good sounding board within your business. And it's a really good way to use Claude or Chat or Gemini as a sounding board for that exact kind of thing. Like, I just need to talk this through. So I was super happy by the time she got done with it because she was like, "Oh, you're right. I really did arrive at all of that myself." Sometimes that's exactly what our clients need.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that with my business coach. Just verbalizing the issue at hand provides clarity, and he just asks great questions. This Socratic approach to coaching, I think, is the only way to go. So that's kind of fun. So if listeners out there need help in that realm, hit Meredith and I up, and we'd love to chat with you about that.
I love it. That would be perfect. All right, Scott, it's tool time.
Tool time.
What have you got for us?
Now we're at the end of season 1. Just want to make sure the letter never came through from ABC, right?
Never heard from Tim or ABC, none of them.
We got away with it. I love it. Living the life of crime. I'm going to just keep going with this AI thing. So the tool I'm going to recommend today to listeners out there is a newsletter, and it's called Superhuman. And you can subscribe at superhuman.ai. That makes it sound like we get paid in some way, which we absolutely don't. This guy does not know I exist, but it comes out often. I think it's daily. And he may be like, "That's a lot." It is probably one of the 3 newsletters I read start to finish. And here's why. There's such a changing landscape in AI. And to be able to try new tools or see what's coming down the pipeline early, I think right now, Meredith, knowing what's coming down the pipeline from an AI perspective at this moment has such an exponential effect on our businesses that I love learning about these things up front. And I find that if I just read this newsletter, that's all I need to do to stay on top of it. It will link me to other things. Good example is Claude Cowork came out with a PC version. And the only way I knew about that is in that day's newsletter, it mentioned it. And I jumped on there because it didn't auto update on my computer. So just things like that. I'm already rolling that out now. I think right now, Meredith, the difference in a couple months is massive against the competition. I think this is just a tool that helps you stay ahead of that.
Yeah, absolutely. At your recommendation, I have subscribed and I really get a lot out of it. I think it's a really good one. All right, Scott. So as we said, we are going to do something a little bit different today. Common topic in the business podcast world, lessons learned, my biggest failures. I, most of the time, feel like someone, and especially the really big business podcasts, they tell a story, but they've polished it up. They've told it a lot of times, and it ends up feeling really like, well, yes, that was a mistake, but you're so glad it happened. Like there's something about it that doesn't make me feel as good as our episode is going to make people feel today. You're going to understand that, man, we fuck up big time in multiple ways. And I think that that is really important. So we want to talk about mistakes that really hurt, ones that cost us money, ones that really stick in your craw, the ones that keep coming back to you. Your inner critic is like, always got it at the ready. So Scott, are you ready to admit to some big mistakes in your business? Which, like you said, I firmly believe that you cannot do business for any length of time and not have at least a few of these in your back pocket.
Yeah. You know what type of person really bothers me? The type of person that says, I don't have any regrets. It always annoys me. I'm like, how can you not have regrets?
Right. Things that you wish you'd done differently, or if you could go back and do it again.
Yeah, like this notion like I live life with no regrets. I'm like, I don't think you really think about the past then.
I think that that's truly the answer, right? You're just not looking at things.
And maybe that's a superpower. Fascinating book on Ronald Reagan called Dutch. It was a biography of him. And I still remember, even though I read it probably 15 years ago, that a key theme in this book was how Ronald Reagan would so forget about his past errors and mistakes to the point where people around him legitimately thought he never thought about them again. And I think for a politician, you have to have a short memory, right?
So what is the first one that you want to talk about?
So the first regret I want to talk about was a strategic business decision, probably in 2016, 2015, right around there, that I still think back and regret because it was a left or right type of decision. I chose left, and I am convinced right was the right decision. Just to provide a little context, this was when I only had the kitchen and bathroom remodeling company, Kitchen and Bath Crate, and we had a meeting in our previous office location in the conference room. We had all of the office staff in there, and we still call it the deep versus wide meeting. And in this meeting, there was some lead up to it, a couple weeks of preparation and discussion and whatnot. But we decided in this meeting between two strategies. The first strategy was wide. And wide meant we were going to focus on kitchen and bathroom remodeling exclusively, but we were going to go after a wide geography. We were going to look to open up multiple locations and stay focused on the niche of kitchen and bathrooms, but geographically expand out. That was the wide. The deep was we are going to serve a smaller geography from one office, but we're going to go deep in product types. So we're going to start with kitchens and bathrooms, but then we're going to go into roofs. We're going to go into windows. We had, a list of 5 or 6 other ancillary / related home improvement trades we were going to go into. We were going to go deep, right? And after much debate, probably a few hours, we ended up deciding to go wide. And the reason I look at that as a mistake is growing a home improvement business geographically has proven to be exceptionally difficult. You're going up against entrenched competition. you're trying to sell to someone an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours away. It just feels more comfortable using someone local. There's all these sorts of hurdles that you run up against. Whereas I think to this day, Meredith, if we would have stayed smaller geographically, but sold more to the same customer, we would have been able to go deep and then probably go wide better thereafter. So to me, it was a classic strategic error on not really understanding the difficulty of the task ahead. And I'll admit, Meredith, if I peel back that onion even further, there was an element of the wide that fed the ego more.
It's the real estate signs in the yard, just like I talked about, right?
Yeah, I could mention that we have multiple offices, which we do, by the way, so I'm going to mention it. But I don't think that that expansion strategy has been nearly as successful as Deep would have been. And then I spent years driving up to the Sacramento region to try to get that going. So there's that opportunity cost. Really, at the end of the day, there's no like, but Meredith, the silver lining is this. I think it was just a bad call. And I think we've been living with the ramifications of that for years. And the business has been successful, don't get me wrong. But there is a little bit of a what could have been if we would have gone deep instead of wide.
I remember that period of time. And I remember you guys gearing up for that conversation. At any time you've actually named a specific meeting, something has gone down. It's interesting that this is the one that you're starting with, because the first one I want to talk about is similar, but opposite. So years ago, probably 2013-ish, I had this idea at Here Comes the Guide that seemed absolutely brilliant. We sell to wedding venues, right? That's always been our bread and butter. It's what we've been doing since 1989. We were now doing it successfully on the web. We were really just in California at this point. And we knew that couples were looking for venues, but they also, at the same time, were looking for their rehearsal dinner location, you know, the place they were going to go on their honeymoon. They were going to buy room blocks, maybe from their wedding venue, but maybe from a nearby venue. So I had this idea that we would go deep. We had all of these clients and we were already charging them for advertising to be a wedding venue. And there are some businesses that are not a wedding venue, but they do offer room blocks, for example, or they do offer rehearsal dinners. So it both made it so that we could charge more per client, and also was a way for us to bring in some new client sets, people who just do honeymoons, just do room blocks, just do rehearsal dinners. I projected the heck out of this. We had the infrastructure, we had the sales staff, we had the relationships already there. This should have been the ultimate business slam dunk, right? The users were already on the site at the moment they were planning all of these things. We called them revenue tabs, which is really embarrassing. Like that's actually the inside word that we used to describe them. On our invoice, it was like rev tab -H for honeymoons. They never made us any revenue for all these revenue tabs. We threw probably $250,000 at it, which for our company at that time was a very large investment of time and opportunity cost because my staff was spending time on this. It never worked. We had these available to clients for 5 years.
Why do you think it never took off? Because even as you explain it, I'm struggling to think through, there has to be a reason. Or does that mean that there's a silver lining because you learned something, so we shouldn't mention it?
I think that, to your point, none of us have ever been able to actually say, this is the reason that it didn't work. The biggest lesson that I took from it, and it has been a useful lesson, is no one ever asked us for it before we started offering it. It's not like venues were saying, hey, Meredith, you know what we really wish we could do? Also have a listing for our rehearsal dinner business. The market never asked for it.
Well, and the brides may have not had a pain point there because there was plenty of ways to find those resources separate from your website, right? So neither one of those two customers had a pain point around this.
Yes. And I think also what we learned was once couples were searching for their venue, in doing the back and forth of the site tour, those kinds of things, the venue, without even really knowing, was solving a lot of those problems because they were like, oh, yeah, we don't do rehearsal dinners, but I know these two restaurants super close by that people love. Like they were doing a lot of that. And I think that that really goes to the heart of it. But That is something that we have used over and over again since then. And then to your point, Scott, once I finally got my ego out of the way enough to say, this is simply not working, we finally decided to go wide instead of deep. And that's when we expanded outside of California and we started putting all of our eggs into that basket. And, 10 years later, we were in every state and had tripled our revenue. So that definitely was the right decision. But at the same time that I was trying so hard to sell revenue tabs, venues from outside of California were asking when we would expand beyond California. And I was like, shh, go away. I'm going deep in California. You know what I mean? Listen to what the market is telling you.
Yeah. And that's so interesting because the common thread between those two stories is the effect that geography had on the expansion strategy. And your company was not constrained by geography. I don't know if you were at the time, but you're a distributed workforce, right? Where I'm exceptionally constrained by geography. And then you and I picked the one that the other one should have picked. Maybe we should have been talking more at that moment. Be like, I'll trade you.
But we were talking then. We were meeting in Pleasanton.
Well, the problem is we're both good salespeople. And so we sold the other person on how great our idea was. Because I'm still sold on your revenue idea.
And I still think that you absolutely should have been able to make it work.
All right. I think as I processed this next mistake, I could attribute it to a personal flaw, even a little bit more than the first one. And that is starting my company in 2010 with a business partner and doing it because I didn't think I could do it on my own. And I thought he would bring something to the table that I couldn't. And then I did it again. I swapped him out with another business partner a few years later, mainly because I didn't think I could do it on my own. And then I bought him out and I've been on my own ever since, and it's been much better. So I've seen this pattern in my life. Insecurity causes me to kind of latch on to someone else in a business situation. Actually, as I verbalize this, I'm thinking through a business that didn't work called Zoosty, where I also had a partner in that one. And that was also because of insecurity. So 0 for 3 on business partners. I do have one that remains from long ago in a non-operating business who's fantastic. But yeah, I'm only 1 for 4 on business partners. And the mistake was just feeling like I couldn't do it on my own and not, sounds super cheesy, not believing in myself.
Well, I mean, it's cheesy only because it's so across the board true that this is something that we struggle with. But also, you were really young. Let's also talk about that. So it's really young to be striking out completely on your own. And you had a family. I understand it. And I understand that the reason those partnerships didn't work was not because you can't work within a partnership. None of them were personality problems or anything like that. But I do understand what you mean about there is something very comforting about like we're in this together.
Yeah. And I wonder, Meredith, maybe I'll throw this back to you. Can you recall a business maneuver that you made out of insecurity that sticks with you in any way?
I know when I first started taking over Here Comes the Guide, I was the youngest. I was so much younger than the people who I was going to be overseeing. And there was a period of time that I was really feeling quite uncomfortable. And at that point, I considered a couple of moves that would have been along those lines, but didn't end up happening. And I'm really grateful that that was the case, but I definitely understand the draw toward it.
What would you say is your second big mistake that you would like to share?
My second big mistake is, so fast forward more than a decade from my first story. We're now spread all the way across the country. We represent venues in every state in the United States. And we were hiring quite a bit, growing quite a bit during this period of time and really figuring out how we could scale our sales operations. And we had a business strategy called RAD, which was short for Radical Focus, which has always been a very big success. I won't get into the details of that. Never happy with just a resounding success. I had to continue to tweak and change, like, oh, I can make it even better. It was when I made an additional change that I called RAD 2.0 that I made some changes to our protocols. I made some changes to our KPIs that at the time I felt were really achievable. They were really reasonable. And very quickly, within the first couple of weeks, my sales staff, including my senior sales staff, started to push back. The thing is that this group of people, they are always up for a challenge. They are always up to do more, be more, level up, all of that. These were super experienced people who were saying, hey, the reality of doing the work that you're asking us to do and the way you're asking us to do it is really impinging on my ability to sell the way that we do it. Here comes the guide. And it's making me uncomfortable, that it's making me make some choices that I've never really had to make before. And thank God they had the wherewithal to push back, because they were completely right. And initially, though, I didn't listen. I was like, look, I hear you, but my decision's made. This is what we're going to do. My thought was that they would get used to it. They would push past the discomfort. But the reality is that it wasn't discomfort that they were bringing to me. It was the fact that they were now having to make choices that were making them feel like they weren't living by our core values. This wasn't anything like defrauding clients or anything. This was very minor stuff, but it was enough that it was pinging them. And so luckily I finally stopped pushing and started really listening, and eventually made the changes that needed to be made, and really took those sales leaders aside and apologized to them and said, like, I got that really wrong from start to finish. And I got it wrong when I instituted the change. I got it wrong when I didn't listen to you the first time. And I really, really am so grateful that you guys continued to raise your hand and to push back. So all of those people still work for me, and we have a great relationship. And maybe it's possible the relationship is better because they realized, hey, she's always told us she wanted our feedback, and then we gave it to her, and then eventually it did end up making a difference. So I didn't make it as easy on them as I should have, but we ended up getting there.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. It reminds me of what we talked about last episode with me rolling out this new sales process. The sales guys are like, it's terrible. I'm like, no, it's not. I read a book.
Exactly. Right. There's no reason this shouldn't work. We've been through these big mistakes. We've lived through them. We've gotten better. We've learned the lessons from them. And also, I know for me, during those periods of time and when things are going really well, there are some key mantras. I don't know how you feel about the word mantra, but key tenets of doing business that continue to come back to both of us. So Scott, what is one of those for you?
Yeah. So in the midst of these bad decisions, I don't know how else to describe them. I do agree there are mantras that become embedded in our company culture. Rallying cries, I might call them. Although no one yells them in the hallways. They should. But you kind of know they're taking root when people throw them out, not sarcastically, but it's almost like they weaponize them a little bit against each other, just the smallest bit to needle each other. So one of them that we have is this notion that we're always trying to get 1% better. And it's kind of funny because after I wrote this, I was watching the coach of the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know how many of our listeners are football fans, but they're an NFL team that recently played in the Super Bowl and won. And the coach was talking about his concept called stacking wins. And what he means by that is each day at the facility or in the weight room or on the practice field, all they're trying to do is stack little micro wins because they know that ladders up to a Super Bowl victory, right? And I think the 1% better concept is just a different way of saying that. Every day, every interaction, every move, every process, every approach, every IDS session is an effort to get 1% better. And it doesn't have to be a massive improvement. 1% is obviously a small percentage, but if you put enough of those together, the laws of compounding say where you are on January 1 is going to be very different than where you are on December 31. And so we have a mantra, a rallying cry around getting 1% better. And when I talk about gently weaponizing it against each other, I'll mean that one person will do something or say something, and another one will be like, well,
is that really getting 1% better?
Yeah. Or someone will do something great. They'll be like, yeah, I got 5% out of that one, right? It just becomes part of your vernacular and your DNA. That's one for us for sure, Meredith. What about you? What would you say is a mantra that's gotten you through some of these bad decisions.
Well, I mean, Scott, I think apropos of the second mistake I was just talking about, it's a question I need to ask myself, which is, am I managing from a place of ego? Am I running the company from a place of ego? Is ego standing in the way of what the company actually needs? Now, let me be clear. I think to a certain extent, anyone who's going to take up the mantle and lead has to have an ego, right? But how do you manage it and control it? And so for me, like with that Brad 2.0 situation, I needed to make sure that I was taking out my, look, this was my idea. This should work. We've put all these things in place. If I'm managing from a place of ego, I am not looking at things rationally. I'm looking at it in terms of, did what I say would happen happen? Did the success I said we could get, did we get it? And the reality is, I need to be looking at the reality of the situation, and it needs to have nothing to do with what did I think was going to happen. It just needs to be what actually needs to happen in the moment. And there are multiple times where I have to tell myself, you know what? Nope. Or even when it comes to like responding to X, Y, or Z email, if I feel myself getting a little bit heated up inside, I'll be like, back away from that keyboard, Schwartz, because whatever's going on in here is going to come out on that keyboard, and you need to figure out if that's actually what needs to happen. And that's my ego coming through. So that's a mantra that I rely on really heavily, that I try to run everything through that filter.
Yeah, no, that's beautifully said. Nothing's going to sabotage a business like unhealthy ego. I do agree with you. It requires a healthy amount of ego.
Right? You have to have some confidence.
Yeah. But man, that email thing hit with me because I don't know what it is about email and maybe text too, but mainly email. That can just get me boiling. And what I do is I snooze it to the next morning immediately. I read it, I get mad, I snooze it, because there's something about kicking it out of my inbox that's my version of a silent FU.
Exactly. You're taking some action to be like, I'm reacting in some way, but it's in a very healthy, you've put the bumpers on your own ego.
Yeah, next mantra. This one's a little bit in the weeds. I don't know if it's mantra worthy, but I say it all the time and I think it all the time, so I'm just going to say it. How a person on your team approaches Mondays tells you almost everything about their GWC. And GWC is gets it, wants it, and has the capacity. I've never had a team member that struggles to get to work and be ready to work on Mondays stick around for very long. It's the weirdest thing. I'm puzzled by what happens on weekends, because our sick call-ins on Mondays skyrocket. Everything on Monday is just kind of weird, which is why you and I are fighting against that by trying to bring something good on Mondays, right? But Mondays, sometimes they live up to their reputation in that people are on the struggle bus on Mondays. Now, I think you got to kind of get through that. But anyway, it's something we tell people when they start. It's something that we remind people of. We put a line in the sand around it, because we're just not going to be that company where Mondays are optional because of how you approach the weekend. You got to be an adult. You got to be ready to go on Monday, or you got to go work for the city or county. And that's fine, right? But that's a tell. I call it the Monday tell. That's something that I think has proven true. What do you think about that idea?
I think it's absolutely true. I think it really gets to also the W of the GWC, the wanted element of things. The people who are going to be really successful are people who are not having to be convinced. They're not having to drag themselves to work. They're like, I want to get in there and do what we're doing. I'm interested in what we're doing. And one of the things that we did recently is our QCIs, our quarterly check-ins. And 3 of the 4 quarters, they're done via an email conversation. One of the questions that we ask is, do you get the Sunday scaries? On Sunday, what are you thinking about work? Because it's become such like a young millennial thing, right? The Sunday scaries.
Yeah, everything's scary, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I think it's a really good question that I was really happy that the vast majority of my staff was like, I used to get the Sunday scaries all the time, and now I really look forward to being at work on Monday. So I think that the Monday tell is a really, really useful way of vetting people who are very invested in their role.
Yeah. What would you say is your second mantra?
The second question that I ask myself all the time, I especially ask as I get to Monday morning, and I ask my chief of staff, my AI chief of staff, I ask her to go over this with me, which is what's the one thing that you know you should do this week? Forcing myself to answer that question. And I'm not talking about a task, like I don't feel like filling out this form or whatever. I'm talking about the higher level business decision that you need to make, the conversation that you need to have, the thought process you need to have around a pivot away from maybe a beloved idea that you had that isn't working the way that you want it to. What is the thing that you know at the bottom of your heart that you need to be doing? You need to do it first this week, because that is really a major function of the CEO, especially in a small to medium-sized business, is figuring out what is the hard thing. And now we're going to do it.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And my third and last one really piggybacks well on that, because it's this idea that success is determined by the number of uncomfortable conversations that you're willing to have. And Meredith, I know for me, if I'm being honest about that one thing that needs to happen that week, it often revolves around an uncomfortable conversation. So I just have to force myself, I think we all do, some more than others, but I have to force myself to schedule that meeting and show up at that meeting or make that phone call. I had one of those happen last week. Oh, Meredith, gosh. I pride myself on not doing just like dumbass stuff. When I think of myself, I think, this guy's not a dumbass, right? I did the ultimate dumbass business move where I had two different parties that are somewhat competitors to each other on the same email thread. I was going back and forth on one topic with these two parties. And I sent one party an email intended for the other party that made it very clear I was moving my business away from the first party. And then, like on Google, you can set up an undo delay. Well, whatever my undo delay duration is was 0.1 second shorter than when I realized this and went down to click on the button.
Oh my gosh.
That's an example of where I had to pick up the phone immediately because I wanted to talk with this guy before he read this email. This is someone I've been working with for 7 or 8 years, right? A relationship I value. But I had to have that conversation, and I didn't want to have that conversation. I wanted to play it off. I wanted to lie about it. I wanted to do all those things other than just tell him I screwed up and you now know where I'm headed with this. And
no, absolutely. You had to make a quick decision on that. But I think if we do start every week as leaders asking and then taking an action, and a lot of times what I found for myself is when I have to take this action that I really don't want to take, is I'll take the next small action. So like you said, I'll just send the email getting the meeting on the books. And then now that's a Wednesday at 10 a.m. problem. And you know what I mean? You can baby step into it, but at least you know you're taking the steps, having that difficult conversation. Finally putting into place the performance improvement plan on the employee that from a culture perspective needs to go, or that kind of thing. It's sucky, but it will make you feel much more empowered. All right, so my third is probably my equivalent of your 1% better kind of topic, that if either one of us wrote a book, this would be the book that we would write, right? I feel like you would write the Always Be 1% Better book. I would write a book about what I call my North Star question, which is, what is the result that you're looking for? This is, for me, that thing that my staff, I will hear them say it in their conversations with each other. And it always makes me feel like, okay, I have done something right, because it's so baked in that they're asking it themselves. And this is for big, huge things. What's the result I'm looking for? Smaller things before I go into that difficult conversation we were talking about. In my personal life, when I think about it with my children, X, Y, or Z is going wrong with my child. What is the actual result that I'm looking for? And then how do I get that? Because I've noticed that a lot of the time we go into situations with a vague sense of what we want, but it's not the same as deciding what specific result that we want. And when you're not specific, you end up being pulled away by emotions, by your rabbit hole on processes. Other people's agenda can get in place. But when we all as a group get really clear for a meeting, for example, we should always know what's the result I'm looking for. With my staff, when we talk about how they're dealing with their wedding venue clients, with every interaction, I need my staff person to be able to say, this is the result I'm looking for from this interaction. I'm not just looking to touch my client. I'm not looking to just reach out. There's a result I need to be looking for, because that I just want to be in contact. I just want to check in. That's a waste of everybody's time. So getting really, really specific with that question multiple times a day, I ask that question. It has become absolutely, as I said, baked into our DNA from the leadership on down. My kids ask that question of themselves. It is my number one mantra. What is the result that I'm looking for?
Do you ever find when you ask that question, sometimes the solution is a little more simple than you initially thought it might be?
I mean, there's a lot of times where I will be like, wait, why are we doing da 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 da? It is shocking how impactful that question is.
Yeah. I really appreciate that characteristic in people because I don't have it. The people that are able to be like, well, why don't we just do this and it solves the problem? And I'm like, but it doesn't solve it as perfectly as I thought. Or they're not flippant about it. They're just very realistic about it. And sometimes I'll have rocks that are technically done, but I'm holding on to them because there's just one little tweak that sometimes good enough is good enough. Now, sometimes good enough is not good enough, but I struggle with good enough not being good enough.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing the difference between those two things can make a big difference. That's really where the rubber meets the road, right? Knowing the difference between when to push that 1% and when to just say, okay, let's just ship this thing. All right. So we've talked through yours. I think your mantras are fantastic. They are completely in line with what I know to be true about the way that you run your business. So for our final micro action of the season, now we actually want this conversation that we've been having today to be useful to you. So listeners, what I would really suggest that you do is, again, take 15 minutes at the beginning of your day and write down a business mistake that you've made, but maybe you haven't fully processed it. So it's not that polished story. It's still new. It's still maybe aching a little bit. Write it down, do 15 minutes of thinking around it, and really figure out, have you learned something from it? What are you going to do differently based on what happened? And it may very well be that just at the end of those 15 minutes, you're going to see that it ended up being a really useful mistake, or what we at Here Comes the Guide would call a beautiful oops.
Yeah. And I would add to that, if you spend those 15 minutes or longer and you don't come up with a lesson, be okay with that. And I know I struggle with that. Meredith, you probably struggle with that. But for the listeners out there, sometimes these mistakes, they're just scars that we'll look at and we'll be like, that really hurt. And I really didn't learn much from it. Definitely start with what's the lesson here. And 90% of the time, I think you'll arrive at one. But also be okay with knowing sometimes we are in a tough seat as leaders. Sometimes we just make the wrong call. Sometimes there's no silver lining. And sometimes you just got to be like, yep, it didn't go well. It's a bad call.
Yeah. And I'm just going to move on from it.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. So Scott, this is, as we've said, our last episode of Monday Next for this season. And I thought that we could use this time, get a little bit meta. So we started the show because we've been having these business conversations, as we say at the top, for 15 years. And we finally decided, you know what, let's record these. We've done it 10 times now. This is your first time doing a podcast regularly. Has there been anything about it that has surprised you about our conversations, about the process, anything?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, it definitely affirmed that I really enjoy talking about this topic specifically with you. I'm not really good at doing things just because I enjoy them. In fact, I'm really bad at doing that. And this was one of those things that we decided to do just because we thought it would be fun. And for me, it has been. And so that's been something really cool. Also, I will say a theme for me from these 10 episodes is a reminder from the way you approach your business, the importance of putting team first. And I'm just not wired that way. Not so much that I'm wired selfishly, although I probably am to a normal superhuman perspective, but more so that I'm just a little more introverted. I'm a little more driven towards a result. And sometimes I do that at the expense of the interpersonal relationships or having people feel cared for. So I definitely also have achieved a reaffirmation that I need to do better taking care of my team, being there for my team, building into my team, supporting my team so they can continue to do the great work that they do. I'm so lucky to be part of this team. And I think prior to episode 1, I was taking that for granted much more than I am as we sit here at episode 10.
Yeah, I have enjoyed it so much too. And I've said this to you that doing this particular show is such an easy lift. We know generally what we're going to talk about, but then from there, it's really just the same conversation that we would have if we weren't recording. And so that has been really, really great, really easy, just pure joy, which we don't have a ton of things that are just easy and we're doing for no other reason other than that, which I really have loved. And I think to your point, there's always big benefit of us working off of each other, right? Because I think we bring ourselves together to a really good place for our companies. The mix of, like I've said in one of the early shows, what would Scott do is a really good question for me when I'm deep in my feels, when I'm deep in my heart forwardness. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe we need to put system first here, sister. That is really, really useful to me. But I think the one thing that I don't want to say that it was a surprise, but it is interesting to me that each one of these episodes we've set up, other than this one, of us being on two different sides of an issue.
Yeah.
But I think without exception, we saw by the end of the conversation that we are very, very aligned.
Yeah, for sure. What we thought would start out as a debate and contention and maybe even be more interesting for the listener because of that, as I prepped and I thought through it, I was like, man, the delta between the two of us just isn't as wide as we thought on most things. Some things there is, but I think that's more just personality stuff. But I'd agree with you 100%. That definitely is a takeaway as well, that those overlapping circles overlap significantly more than I would have thought pre-episode 1.
Right. And I also just want to brightline the fact that it has become really clear to me through these conversations that you talk about being team systems first, but you have a lot of things in your business that are baked in to make sure that your people feel really good about your team, about their role within the larger role of the company. And so I really see through these conversations how much you've built that in.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely have some room to improve, but appreciate that.
All right. So the elephant in the room, the question that we haven't fully answered, even I think to ourselves for the long term, is, are we going to continue doing this? And I think where we've landed, Scott, is that we're definitely going to take a break on it, mostly because my running a company and running Currently Reading and doing everything else that I do has really let me know that right now I need to press pause on doing this. But I say that, of course, with great reluctance. But the thought is that maybe we will continue doing it in the future.
Yeah, no doubt. And I love that we approached this as 10 episodes and we're going to see how it feels. And by feels, we meant feels fun, but we also meant, does this weave into my why or my direction in the near term, right? And sometimes the things we really want to do or are interested in don't make temporal sense. That's absolutely okay. So we don't know if this will ever come back, right? That's the emphatic answer to the question of what's happening with Monday Next. But correct me if I'm wrong. We do know a couple things. We do know, number one, you and I will not stop having these conversations in some format. Number two, you and I have a passion for helping other business owners and operators in whatever extent we can. And number three, one day down the road, you and I will probably be doing that in a collaborative way in some way. Who knows what the format is like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right, because we are inexorably pulled toward that. There's no question. And it's going to come at a time in the not very distant future when I can kind of turn things down at Here Comes the Guide and get a little more of that time back. And that is going to be something that I very much look forward to, and a part of the reason that I am being very intentional about thinking through my timeline of stepping away as CEO of Here Comes the Guide and continuing to work there, but taking a chairman of the board role, and that's coming in the next couple of years.
Yeah, super excited for that next phase when it gets here for you, and I'll be waiting on the other side.
All right, well, we started this show because we believed, and we still believe, that there is no one right way to run a business. I, of course, build systems with heart. You build with systems. But we both have companies that work, and we've also found that those things are not at all mutually exclusive. So over these 10 episodes, hopefully, listeners, you've heard us really, really speak to you honestly about all manner of different topics. And hopefully it's made you feel a little bit more equipped to do your work.
Yeah, and the thing I keep coming back to is that the conversations we've had here are the conversations every business owner needs to be having with someone, whether that be an EO forum, whether that be a business coach, whether it be a trusted friend and advisor that kind of understands these types of things. You don't need motivational speeches. You don't need best practices from a textbook. All those things are accessible through AI or through other tools. But you do need real, honest conversations with someone who knows your business well enough to call you out and loves you enough to do it kindly, or at least to do it, right?
Right. Exactly. There is absolutely no question. So hopefully we have given you something real to take back to your business and to act upon. If you're interested in working with Scott or with me directly, we are both available for that. And we hope very much that we will be back in the future. So thank you for spending 10 weeks with us from the bottom of my heart and from whatever organ you use for emotion, Scott?
It's my spleen. My spleen is my emotion organ.
All right, from the bottom of his spleen. Thank you. Until Monday next, keep being audacious.